What is going on, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the Mets Central Podcast, episode 72. Definitely a lot more positive episodes now back to back, which is nice to see as the New York Mets take 2 out of 3 against the Yankees, splitting the season series at 3, so no one could have any bragging rights for meaningless interleague play this time around. But either way, the Mets get the job done and take 2 out of 3, which is really what we asked for going into it. It sucks because Sunday's game was right in their grasp, but either way, I'm happy with 2 out of 3. This team's starting to play better baseball, especially with the offense, which we'll dive into, amongst other things, maybe some trade deadline stuff as rumors are starting to flow in. And the deadline is getting really, really close. I mean, we're 3 weeks away from Thursday, and the All Star break is next week. So things are moving really quickly, which it's just weird because it feels like the season just started yesterday. But we're going to tackle all of that before we jump into everything. I ask that you please leave a like on your way into the episode if you're watching live or on replay. Leave a like, subscribe if you guys are new to the channel, especially if you're Met fans or if you're Yankee fans. Why not? You could subscribe as well, and hear us when we're either happy or annoyed with the team, and then turn on your notifications so you know when we upload or go live here on the channel. We will get to your comments, questions, everything throughout the live episode. We're not ignoring your comments. We will just get to them later on through the episode. But I already see MJ is in here, and yes, we will be talking about the deadline. But yeah, the Mets take 2 out of 3. Very chaotic series. So there's, I know I say this with every series, but there genuinely is. This might be the most jam-packed episode in terms of stuff to break down because way more exciting than the first series. Would you say, Matt?
Yeah, I would say definitely the first series at Yankee Stadium was definitely a bit boring. I know the Mets exactly didn't play the greatest baseball in that series either, so there wasn't exactly much to talk about. And the games that they lost, they did get blown out in those two games. And then the one that they did win, it came down to it was a tight game right at the end, and you saw Edwin Diaz strike out Aaron Judge. But thankfully, this series was played a lot more cleaner. Played a lot more cleaner. Maybe you could point to the third game and say like, okay, maybe that wasn't like the cleanest game of baseball the Mets, the Mets played, specifically, a couple, and we'll touch upon it, but a little bit of a bad base running error there by Francisco Lindor later in the game, but overall, listen, on the last podcast when we talked about and recapped the Brewers series, we talked about how okay, cool, you take 2 out of 3 from the Brewers, but you know getting that momentum, it doesn't matter unless you build on it. And going to this series, we said that you want to build up the momentum of that Brewers series. And going to this Yankee series, we both said that listen, we could either see the Mets take 2 out of 3, or we could see the Mets lose 2 out of 3 because the pitching matchups just weren't in the Mets' favor at all. I mean, they were running out a bullpen game in 2 out of those 3 games, but they took care of business, and we said that the key to winning this series against the Yankees was you had to make sure that you took the first 2 games out of this series because, Max Fried, tough pitcher to face against. He's arguably one of the, favorites alongside guys like Scooble and Crochet to win the AL Cy Young over there. So, and listen, I mean, Fried wasn't the most dominant that he's ever been. We've definitely seen him put up better fights against the Mets, especially when he was, in the Braves, when he was playing for the Braves in the NL East for all these years. But, they were decent against Max Fried for the most part. It was just, like I said, the pitching matchups weren't exactly in their favor, especially for that third game as well. But, I mean, also a big positive that I'm going to take from this series, and it sucks because I can't also be too positive about it. Like there has to be a little bit of pessimism for me in this area because I talked about this before, but for the first time in a long time, it feels like the main reason why the Mets won the series was because the offense did what they were supposed to do. They came in clutch. They hit a ton of home runs in the series. They drove in guys, when runners were in scoring position, and overall through this whole series, they always got the clutch hit. The only part about it, like I said, like where I have to be a little bit of pessimism from is, again, we've seen this with the Mets over these past 4 years, and we've talked about it with the bipolar offense. So it's nice to see that the offense in this series, was able to break out and they did what they were supposed to do. But the main question is always, can they sustain this for a long period of time? Because we've seen this over the past 4 years under the Chavez and Barnes regime, where they'll have games where they hit very well, and then there'll be stretches of baseball, like we've seen for the majority of the season, where the offense just goes completely silent. So, like I said, I liked what I saw from the offense this series, but it has to continue and it has to sustain. And especially now, the Mets have two more series before going to the All Star break, and they're very two winnable series as well. So, if you could go into these two series against the Orioles, which the first game of the series starts tonight, and then you have that final series in Kansas City before going to the All Star break. I think if the Mets can go 4-2 in these last two series and then go into the All Star break on a bit of a high note, I think that'd be a very big positive, especially with the fact that it looks like, and I know for this series, Jesse Winker got activated, so it's going to be nice to have his bat back in the lineup. And then also with the fact that it looks like the Mets are going to get Manaea and Senga back for the Kansas City Royals series as well, which is a huge positive because this starting rotation needs reinforcement and needs quality depth in it.
Yeah, and I'm agreeing with what Ray's saying in the chat right now, which we'll get to some of your other comments as well throughout the episode. But yeah, they should be beating up on teams like Baltimore. And I know we said about Pittsburgh, like you're saying in the comments here, but the Royals aren't playing great baseball. This would be a huge boost of confidence to not only us as fans, but to the team itself. Like, okay, we're getting these reinforcements now, and the deadline's coming, so we're only going to get more reinforcements, and you still have more on the way with, the return of Brooks Raley on the horizon sometime soon. Amongst other names as well, like Kranick starting his throwing progression as well. Not that he was sharp when we last saw him, but maybe getting some rest is going to help rejuvenate him to what it was. I mean, last year we saw it, like Reed Garrett towards the end. Towards the end of June or May, whatever it was, he went on the IL with an elbow injury. He was ineffective entirely right before he went on the IL. Goes on the IL, comes back, and we see a completely different Reed Garrett, one that we saw earlier in the season for the remainder of the season. And hopefully Max Kranick is kind of in the same fate there. Jose Budo's going to come back at some point. So at least you do have those reinforcements on the way with the deadline. So like you're saying, like the chat is saying, I mean, you take care of business against these teams that you should be beating. I mean, this is, and I hate to, really put an emphasis on this because, we've seen in the past, and, you bring it up all the time that sometimes they'll play down the competition. This is the lighter part of the schedule, these next four series. The Orioles are not playing good baseball this year. The Royals are in a rough stretch right now. The Reds are a mediocre team at best, maybe sneak into a wild card spot, and that's probably doubtful. I'd have to even check the standings because I don't even know where they are. I mean, I know for a bit they were hanging in the wild card race. Right now, they're 3.5 back, so they're a fringe team at best. And then you play the Angels, who are the Angels. So this is the part of the schedule where you really need to take advantage of the fact that one, you're getting the reinforcements back. Two, to really again push management to say, you know what, you guys are worth going all in for. And if they could handle business, like you're saying, just win each series. I'm not asking for sweeps. I would like sweeps here and there. But I'm asking just win every series, and then that is telling management go all in for us. And you add that to the reinforcements they're getting with Manaea and Senga and Raley, Budo, Kranick, all these other names that I may be forgetting, and then Winker, like you mentioned, who's coming back today. Who knows what's going to happen with Marte right now? But either way, you give that confidence, and all of a sudden, I mean, it's a complete 180 of where we were 2-3 weeks ago with this team.
No, definitely. And I talked about this, especially on the last podcast, that, especially this month with July, because, we probably didn't anticipate. I think we anticipated Manaea being back a little bit, early around this time frame. But I think the expectation with Sang is maybe you have to wait a little bit longer. Maybe the last couple weeks of July, maybe early August. But the fact that that you're getting Sanga back now in this last series before the All-Star break, that's huge. And like I said, for me, and we talked about this last series, but I brought up the point that pretty much most of July was about survival. It's getting past this month, staying afloat, and just getting to the trade deadline until you can bring in some more reinforcements, in terms of externally, because obviously the Mets do have some internal options that that are coming back from injury, like Brooks Raley, like you mentioned. But I think now, and the fact that you have back-to-back series wins, and coming off the Pirates series, when we were looking at these two series, both against the Brewers and the Yankees, we weren't expecting much. I mean, if we were to be honest, we were probably expecting like a 1-5 stretch here. But the fact that the Mets went 4-2 in this series, and now, like you mentioned, you look at the fact that and listen, not every series is a guarantee, because obviously we see with the Mets, and I talked about this, where the Mets do play down the competition for some reason. It's annoying because it's the same thing we see with the Rangers, and it's just we can't escape it, no matter which team we root for. But with the fact that you look at it, and the Mets now have 4 favorable series and 2 before the All-Star break, it's really an opportunity for this team, like you mentioned, to say to management and show to management and David Stern to say, listen, we're a good team. You should believe in us, and you should be buying for us, because if we can just get a couple more reinforcements in, if we can maybe get a bat or two, if we could get some relievers, if we can get another starter, we can go down this stretch, into the All-Star break, and then down the stretch into the postseason, and we can get in and we can really do some damage. It's going to be tough because the National League is stacked, and we've talked about this all year, and even prior to the season starting, we said that the National League from top to bottom, apart from a few of the bottom feeder teams like the Rockies and the Pirates and the Marlins, we all said that the National League is stacked. So it's going to be tough. There's a lot of very good teams in the National League, but we've seen this team last year. Not many people gave them a shot in the playoffs last year, and they surprised, and they pushed the Dodgers to 6 games. Now you look at the addition of Juan Soto, and if this offense is now going to start to click, and I cross my fingers, because we've said this for multiple times, maybe the offense finally starting to turn around, and then they go back to what they were previously. So if the offense can start to click and look like this more consistently, and then you add in some of the reinforcements both internally and then trades externally, this can be a very interesting team going, down the stretch into the playoffs. So we'll see what happens, but they got to take care of business, especially in these next 2 series before the All-Star break.
Yeah, especially with the offense, because I've been saying for a bit now, if the pitching struggles, at least I can say there's reinforcements. The only offensive piece that's coming back is Jesse Winker. Um, you are facing the Orioles, who have the fourth worst ERA amongst baseball. You're facing the Angels, who have the seventh worst. The Reds are middle of the pack. Those are the type of teams that you have on the schedule. And the Royals are actually surprisingly good in terms of that regard. I do want to look in terms of starter ERA in comparison, which, yeah, because when you do that, the Orioles are second worst in baseball in terms of starting pitching ERA. The Reds are still kind of middle of the pack, actually more towards the top half. The Royals are pretty high on that list, and the Angels are. Where are the Angels on this one? They're kind of more middle of the pack down. Their starting pitching actually isn't really dragging them down that much. But either way, you need to take advantage of these type of pitchers, considering you just beat up on the thing that gives encouraging signs to where maybe they are finally turning a corner. And this is something where, if I'm going to spin it on a positive compared to the down to it that we've been talking about, where they do show these flashes and then they kind of disappear. If I'm going to put a positive spin on this, I'm encouraged with the way they hit off Mizorowski. Carlos Rodon, even though he's Jekyll and Hyde, that's a respectable starting pitcher in this league. And then Max Fried, even, I mean, they got to him more than I thought they would. They chased him out of the game relatively early, is really what it comes down to, which is something that we saw this team do last year, where they would chase these starting pitchers out of games early. And that's what helped propel this offense to where they got to the bullpens. And then all of a sudden from there, you saw them fire on all cylinders. So if I'm going to spin it in that light, at least you're seeing them do it against competent starting pitching. But like you said, at the same time, we still need to see them do it more. And that means, if anything, you have no excuse to not annihilate the Orioles starting pitching staff that just absolutely stinks. The Reds, who are kind of mediocre. The Royals, who are towards the top half, but you still should be able to beat up on some of these guys. And then, of course, the Angels, who are the Angels. So we'll see how they fare and build off this. But do you have anything to add before we get into the series rundown here?
No, we could get right into the series rundown.
So, in terms of game one, this is going to absolutely kill my voice breaking down all these games, especially once we get to the next few. But Justin Hagenman on the mound versus Marcus Stroman in the first game of the Subway Series. And a rude greeting to Justin Hageman as he allows back to back home runs off the rip to Jason Dominguez and Aaron Judge. In the bottom of the first inning, though, the Mets would respond as Brandon Nimmo gets a leadoff double, and Juan Soto ties the game up with a 2-run home run. It was beautiful to see him do that to his former club. Jeff McNeil gets hit by a pitch. Torrens with a hit. The Mets fail to score additional runs, though, unfortunately, throughout that inning. In the bottom of the third, Juan Soto with a double. Alonso drives him in with a single to make it 3-2. In the top of the fourth, Bellinger would tie the game back up at 3 with a solo shot. In the fifth inning, LeMahieu would get a single. Austin Warren comes into the game and he allows a 2-run shot to Jason Dominguez. And in the bottom of the sixth, the Mets end up getting to the bullpen. Ian Hamilton comes in and he surrenders a home run to Brett Beatty, which made it a 5-4 ball game. In the bottom of the seventh inning, the Yankees bring in Luke Weaver, who has been nails for the most part, but also been struggling lately. And the Mets would capitalize on his struggles as Alonso would draw a walk and Jeff McNeil hits a home run, one of the most electric home runs we've seen throughout the season to give the Mets a 6-5 lead. And that really showed the offense meant business that day. And Reed Garrett, credit to him, who nails down the 6-out save, something that the Mets have not really got throughout the season, a 6-out save. So Reed Garrett notches it down to give the Mets the win there in game number one. In game number two, it is really small, the notes, because of how much there is to unpack here. But Frankie Montas versus Carlos Rodon. Let's get through this. In the bottom of the first inning, Marte gets a leadoff double. Lindor walks Soto with a sac bunt, which made all of us lose our minds until uh, Pete Alonso walks and Brandon Nimmo hit that grand slam to make it a 4-0 ball game. In the top of the second inning, Jazz Chisholm hits a solo shot to respond and make it 4-1. In the bottom of the second, Taylor gets on from an error. Marte with a single to drive him in to make it 5-1. In the top of the third inning, Austin Wells gets a home run to make it 5-2. In the bottom of the fifth, Lindor walks, gets the third after stealing a bag and advancing on a wild pitch. Alonso would hit a home run to make it 7-2 there. In the top of the sixth inning, Peraza and Grisham with back-to-back singles. Bellinger makes it 7-4 with a double. In the top of the seventh inning, Volpe with a solo shot makes it 7-5 because, of course, a 7-2 lead has to be close. This is the Mets we're talking about. But they would expand back on the lead, as in the bottom of the seventh inning, Ronnie Mauricio would get a double, and Lindor makes it 8-5 with a single. Soto walks, and then thank you to Aaron Boone for bringing in a young rookie pitcher as Pete Alonso tanks a home run to make it 11-5. But again, it wouldn't be Mets baseball without the theatrics of making it close, as Ryan Stanek throws nearly 40 pitches in this outing as he walks Judge and Rice, gets a double to make it 11-6. Bottom of the eighth inning, Lindor with a double, Soto with a single makes it 12-6, and then Diaz locks things down as the Mets wanted to go to Zach Pop, but they didn't get him ready in time. More on that a little bit later, just because I ranted on that, but I'll expand on it. In game number three, the Mets go with an opener in Chris Davinsky versus Max Fried, so the ace-off of the century here in game number three. And in the top of the third inning, the aforementioned Zach Pop enters the game, allows a home run to Austin Wells, who makes it 1-0. In the top of the fourth inning, Giancarlo Stanton with a double, Bellinger with a single, Volpe hits into a force out, which makes it 2-0. LeMahieu with a single, Wells makes it 3-0 on a force out. We go to the fifth inning where Goldschmidt would get a leadoff double and a questionable decision to pitch to Aaron Judge, but Brandon Waddell pitches to Aaron Judge, and a 2-run shot would make it a 5-0 ball game there. In the bottom of the fifth inning, McNeil, Senger, Marte, and Lindor all hit singles consecutively, and Lindor brings in a pair on his single to make it 5-2. In the bottom of the sixth, Nimmo gets hit by a pitch. Mauricio, Beatty, McNeil all get singles, 5-3 by the end of that. Senger hits into a double play, questionable decision making there, but that made it 5-4. Brazoban enters the game Goldschmidt and Grisham with singles. Judge with a sac fly makes it 6-4. In the bottom of the seventh, Lindor gets hit by a pitch. Soto hits into a fly out, which Bellinger makes an unbelievable grab and throw to double up Lindor at first base. Some not great base running there by Francisco Lindor, unfortunately. And in the bottom of the ninth inning, the Mets would fail to give a competitive inning thanks to some garbage from the umpire behind the dish as Carlos Mendoza would get himself tossed from the game, arguing balls and strikes with Luis Torrens up to bat, which you had a feeling it was going to happen at some point because the umps were just terrible this entire series, and I can't wait for the ABS system to be implemented full time. My voice is dead, but Matt, I'll let you jump in. Your thoughts with, I guess we'll kind of work backwards and talk about game three here first, just because this was kind of the game where it felt like, even though it was a punt game, it was such a missed opportunity. Um, what were your thoughts in terms of just like certain decisions or of like Zach Pop being in there maybe for too long, in terms of Torrens not pinch hitting for Senjer with the bases loaded, some questionable base running for Lindor. Your thoughts on all that stuff from game number three?
Yeah, the third game of the series definitely had a lot of action in this game, and I do agree with you to a certain point. It definitely was a missed opportunity because you could have grabbed another win, especially if you grab a bullpen game win against this Yankee team, especially when you're facing a guy like Max Fried. I mean, that would be a very good win to have. But I mean, listen, at the end of the day, I'm not too mad because they took 2 out of 3. They won this series, but it definitely does suck a little bit that they couldn't complete the sweep. But yeah, for me, there were definitely some decisions that Mendoza made that I didn't agree with, and that's something that that we've talked about a lot this year. Where we do like Mendoza. I think he can be a good manager, but sometimes he does make some questionable decisions. And I know this game was very tough because again, it's a bullpen game, so a ton of you're making a ton of small moves here and there, trying to figure out which pitcher is right to throw in which situation. So it is tough, but there were some moves I just didn't agree with. Okay, so Chris Davinsky starts. He throws 2 very good innings. I mean, I think out of the first 15 pitches he threw, 14 of them were strikes. So he pitched very well. Credit to him. He then goes to Zach Pop in the third, and when I was listening to the game, I was very confused on why he went to Zach Pop because I'm like, okay, you got 2 very good innings out of Chris Davinsky, doesn't give up a run. For me, I thought the move was to go right to Brandon Waddell because if you go to Waddell at least could give you 4 to 5 innings, and that could at least stretch you to the sixth or seventh inning. He went to Zach Pop, which I don't agree with, but okay, cool. He puts in Zach Pop, obviously gives up the home run right away to Austin Wells, and gets out of that inning only down 1-0. I'm like, okay, cool. Listen, if you told me before this game started that Zach Pop was going to pitch an inning and he would only give up 1 run, I would shake your hand and I would say, cool. I will gladly take that because I would have expected more damage out of Zach Pop on the mound. But then he lets Zach Pop go out there and start the fourth inning, which to me, I just don't agree with at all. Because at that point, you're pushing your luck. You got the 1 inning out of Pop. He only gave up the 1 run. At that point, okay, cool. Go to Brandon Waddell. And like I said, he could at least give you 4 to 5 innings, and then that gets you to the seventh or eighth inning. Going to keeping Zach Point in that game and trying to get an extra inning out of him, I think, again, that's just something out of Mendoza. And we've seen him a lot of times where he tries to be cute and he tries to finesse the game a little bit. And at that point, like I said, you got the 1 inning out of him. Don't push your luck. Get him out of the game. Go to Waddell. And unfortunately, he tries to keep him in the game a little bit longer. Gives up a couple runs. They're down 3-0 at that point, and then Waddell comes in, gives up the 2-run home run to Judge. Which, yeah, looking back at it, he probably should have walked him. He should have, but it happens. And listen, for me with Waddell not walking Judge, for me, I probably would have done it, but there's also no guarantee that even if Waddell walks Judge in that situation, that the next batter coming up after him doesn't hit a home run as well. So it's all hypothetical, and at the end of the day, They didn't walk Judge. He hit a home run. They're down 5-0. And I mean, listen, they made it close. They rallied, which is something that I even like. It could be because I was even thinking to myself, during watching this game, I'm like, okay, even if they don't end up winning this game, I like and appreciate the fact that the Mets offense was actually, they were fighting this whole game, and they weren't out of it. Especially with them, getting the bases loaded, driving in a couple runs. We saw Lindor, and in the fifth inning, he had a two-run single to cut the lead down to 5-2, and then you go to the sixth inning. They load up the bases, and I know a lot of people, and you brought up the point that that Luis Torrens should have been up at bat at that point. And even later in the game, we saw in the ninth inning, Luis Torrens went up the pinch hit for Hayden Sanger. I agree that Torrens probably should have been in that game, but I know that Mendy even said that before the game because Torrens the last two games he got beat up a lot behind the plate. He got hit with a lot of fly balls. Or sorry, a lot of foul balls off the bat. So, and that's the reason why he didn't start this game because he wanted to give him an off day. So, and I get because if you pinch hit for him in the sixth inning, now Torrens has to go out there and and catch probably three more innings. So I understand why Mendy didn't exactly go to pinch hit for Hayden Singer in that situation. It just sucks that bases loaded and okay, he hits into a double play, he drives in a run, but you would have liked a bit more damage on that situation. And then I mean you continue on. In that game, obviously, Brazaban gets into a little bit of trouble, gives up the one run. Rico
Which you didn't
Garcia,
get help there from Alonso at first base, who should have been able to field that
yeah,
ground
that
ball, which
was
also took a weird hop, but
that was definitely a tough play. And then I mean Rico Garcia, who listen, I'm not saying Rico Garcia is a long term solution for this bullpen, but he definitely deserves another opportunity out of this bullpen because he pitched two very good innings. Struck out Judge looking with a nasty curveball. So encouraging signs from Rico Garcia. So like I said, he definitely deserves another opportunity to come out and pitch out of this bullpen. But then the inning that we all point to and when we probably say, okay, this is where the Mets lost this game was, the seventh inning because, Mark Leiter comes into pitch, hits Lindor right away. And then, off the bat, I'm like, okay, single, first and second, no outs. You have Lindor and Juan Soto you have Lindor on second base and Soto on first base, but just Cody Bellinger just makes an absolutely beautiful play, and it sucks for me to say because obviously I don't want to see the Yankees make nice play in the fields, but I have to put my hand up and say, I mean, because that was an impressive catch by Cody Bellinger. And look, out of 100 times, Bellinger 99 times probably doesn't catch that ball. It either ricochets off his glove or it hits the grass in front of him, and he traps the ball. But it's one of those plays where you just have to tip your cap to Bellinger and say that's a hell of a play. And it sucks especially because when you look at the first two games, because Bellinger wasn't playing left field in those first two games. It was Jason Dominguez, and we saw Jason Dominguez mess up a lot of fly balls in those first two games. So if Dominguez was in left field in that situation, probably doesn't make that play. And the Mets get first and second, like I said, in that situation, and maybe they score, maybe they don't score, but they would have an opportunity. And I know a lot of people will point to Lindor and say it was a bad base running mistake. The only mistake I'll say with Lindor on that part is he should have slid. He should have slid because after Soto hits the line ball, Lindor does the right thing on the base path. He goes halfway, and it's a quick boom boom play. It was a nice throw by Bellinger as well. But for me, Lindor, you got to slide there because if he slides, he's probably is safe. He probably is safe, and the Mets get another opportunity. But it is what it is. It was a tough play they got out of it, and I mean, Pete walked. Nimmo then forced out, so they couldn't get anything in that inning. And then again, we go to the bottom of the eighth. Ronnie Mauricio, who comes off the bench, has two hits. He singles to lead off that inning, and then Brett Beatty hits a hard ground ball right to Paul Goldschmidt. They turn a double play, and they get out of that inning right there after they get McNeil to ground out. So it was just, by the way those late innings went, you looked at it and it's like, okay, this is just not the Mets day. And obviously they ended up losing that game. And good on Mendoza as well to get ejected out of that game because I don't know what the umpire was looking at out of those two changeups that Devin Williams threw. Those are nowhere near the zone. So, But it is what it is. Like I said, frustrating to lose that last game of the series, especially since you could have swept the Yankees, but they took 2 out of 3. So, I'm not going to sit here, and complain like all that much. But there were definitely some questionable decisions from Mendoza's end.
Yeah. I had the same thought during the seventh inning. Once that double play happened, I was like, they're not winning this game, unfortunately. The Zach Pop thing, just because I want to go back to that for a minute. The thing that was also strange to me about it is why the leash wasn't short. The second Stanton got that leadoff double in the fourth, right then and there, you got to pull him. Like there, you have Bellinger coming up, and you got the lefty up in the bullpen. Why are you not going to Brandon Waddell earlier when he could give you the innings and also give you solid innings? And again, I know he allowed the home run to Judge, but he's been solid out of the pen and reliable enough to where put him in earlier and he'll still give you the innings that you need. Like I trust Waddell enough to do that. So that was just very head scratching to me. And honestly, this entire series, it's kind of unfortunate that there were so many times where I was like, what's going on with certain managerial decisions? Like in game number two, even, it's just you have the lead that you do. And I understood when Ryan Stanek was up in, or when Edwin Diaz was up behind Ryan Stanek in that eighth inning in that second game, because, okay, if this goes south, you got to put Diaz in right then and there. But once Stanek got out of that, and especially once they add another run, Mendoza waits until Juan Soto gets that single to then get Zach Pop up. And it's like, oh, yeah, now we want to go to a different arm. What's the difference between a 5-run lead and a 6-run lead to where that was the difference in Edwin Diaz pitching versus not pitching? That was another just very questionable decision I had. And then with the Sencher thing, with the bases loaded, if you didn't want to pinch hit there, okay, but he can't swing the bat first pitch. Like
Yeah.
you have to tell him just go up there and strike out, even because a strikeout there would have been better than a double play. And I know it brought in a run, but you had Marte and Lindor, and then maybe even Soto coming up that inning. That was the opportunity. And you probably would have scored either way on the Marte line out. So it would have been 5-4 anyway with 2 outs. And then you get Francisco Lindor to the plate. And who knows what happens there? Maybe Lindor ends up driving in a couple runs there, and the Mets all of a sudden have the lead. It just was the perfect combination, unfortunately, of things going south for the team. But at least they went and won the first 2 games. And that's the only thing with the Diaz thing where I could say, okay, maybe they just want to lock up that game and go into game number 3 and be like, all right, well, we're probably not winning this one anyway. So it kind of is what it is with that. But I also didn't love that because it's like a 5-6 run lead difference. You didn't need to. Like the one time it made sense to get a little cute with the bullpen, if you will, and try to steal an inning from a lower arm. That was the opportunity where it's still a 1-run game in the third game, and it's like, yeah, now we're gonna try to be cute. It's just very weird, the thought process there, in my opinion, or lack thereof thought process.
Yeah, no, listen, I fully agree. I think in that second game, it definitely was. It does suck to use Diaz in that situation because realistically, in a perfect world, you shouldn't have to run Diaz out there when you have a 5-6 run lead. I do understand it though, kind of from Mendy's point of view, where it's like, okay, because when you look at the context of the last couple weeks and the fact that the Mets had such a bad stretch over these last few weeks, I think from Mendy's point of view, he's like, okay, we have to rack up a couple wins here. Let's just guarantee a win right here. Let's play it safe and let's just secure this win without trying to get cute like we talked about it before. So, like I said, in a perfect world, I don't want to see Diaz out there just because you shouldn't have to use him in a 5-run, 6-run lead there. But like I said, from the point of view that Mendy was probably looking through, where it's like, okay, let's just secure a win here because we've been on such a bad stretch. I do agree with it from that standpoint, but it definitely does suck to use Diaz in that spot.
Yeah. And then in terms of just the first game, just to quickly touch on that a bit, it was nice to see Juan Soto have the type of game that he did. And just nice to see overall this offense, you kind of had like everyone in this offense played a role at some point, and that's what I really like to see because even the guys like Beatty and Mauricio who didn't, well, more so Mauricio who didn't contribute as much in terms of just like the RBI totals at the very least. He still had a couple of good moments where he was coming in and getting some big hits. You got, I mean, you had a multi-hit game from him in Game 3. Brett Beatty had that home run. It was nice to see Marte, which I've been very harsh with Marte on this podcast. If you guys have been listening for a bit now, I gotta admit that Unk still might have it a bit because I can't lie, he's actually been pretty productive for the most part lately. I didn't love him leading off, but that's besides the point. I mean, the only guy I could look at, and if I hate to keep picking on the guy and say, he hasn't been good, is still Vientos. He's the only one
Yeah.
throughout the series where I'm like, you didn't provide anything. And outside of Tyrone Taylor, too, who just he's on his way to being DFA'd once series back and once they acquire a center fielder. And it's unfortunate because I like Taylor, but he's not playing good ball at
Yeah.
all. Uh, but everyone else, I mean, you have the moment from McNeil. You have Brandon Nimmo getting that grand slam. Soto had his big game in game number 1 and still had some clutch RBIs. Lindor had some clutch moments throughout the series. It was just really nice to see everyone getting involved outside of the two guys that I mentioned, which, that's going to be a different conversation. I mean, Tyrone Taylor, I think, is a simple solution because, again, he's a fourth outfielder. I think he just rides the bench once they acquire a center fielder. And then, we'll see what happens when Siri comes back. The Vientos thing is definitely more of a what do we do here type thing because it's like, I'm not convinced. I don't know if this guy's playing healthy or not. I don't know if like what is going on anymore with Mark Vientos because he just is lost completely. I mean, we already knew he was slow on the bases. I feel like he's slower. We knew he couldn't play the field. I feel like he's playing the field worse than he did last year. And then just in the box, I mean, you're not seeing anything from him. And you can't send him down, which is the unfortunate part
Yeah.
when he desperately needs to go down to AAA. That's going to be the one where it's like, I don't know what you do there. But I mean, outside of that, just because I don't want to go too much into like the downside of this, because it was overall just a good series, which was encouraging to see because his team desperately needed that. And especially to get bounce back performances too from guys like Reed Garrett. And I know Brosban struggled in that last game, but he looked really good in that game 1, which was encouraging to see. So overall, a lot of positives at least.
Yeah, I mean, just to briefly touch on on the Vientos point, it sucks that he has no options left because like what we saw with Alvarez, like 2 weeks ago or a week ago, he got sent down and it's helped because I think ever since being sent down, Alvarez has hit 4 home runs in the minors, which uh, who knew that getting him away from Eric Chavez would work, but that's neither point here or there, but. Yeah, no, I don't know what to do with Vientos at this point because I mean they kind of have to play him right now just because you kind of have to rotate through guys because you don't want to kill Beatty and Mauricio, so he's gonna have to rotate right now. But I think coming to the trade deadline, I think if you have to throw Vientos in there in a package to get a very good player either on the pitching end or another high quality bat. You do have to consider it because listen, like, do I think Mark Vientos is as bad as he is playing right now? No, I still think there is a good player in there, but this team is in win now mode, and this team can't be waiting around and sitting around waiting for him to to find his form again. So if you can flip him for a very good player at the deadline, I think David Stearns is going to very much think about it. And like I said, if he's one of those players where he has to get thrown in to get a package done to get a very good player, I think it's going to happen. I think it's going to happen because right now Beatty's playing better than him. Mauricio, who okay, he hasn't exactly lit it up since being called up to the major leagues. He's looked better than him, and both of those guys can play the field well. So, and I'm not saying that Mauricio and Beatty are both Gold Glove caliber defensive players, but they're definitely not butchers in the field like Mark Vientos is, because he's been terrible all around this year. Both in the box, hitting, and then just fielding in general. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens with Vientos once the Mets get to the trade deadline, because as we talked about, he has no more options, so you can't send him down. So it's going to be interesting to see what they do with him. But yeah, I mean, just talking about that first game a little bit, it definitely sucked starting off that game, giving up the back-to-back home runs to Jason Dominguez and both Aaron Judge. The Aaron Judge more one specifically because I hated the pitch location from Hageman there, because I believe the count going into that last pitch before he hit the home run was 2-2. And when you're pitching to Aaron Judge, you should be, trying to get him fish low and outside. Because for some reason, Hageman tries to throw him an inside sinker. And look, if you're going to go inside to Aaron Judge in that situation, you have to make sure you go up and in on Judge. Because you have to try to jam him. But he throws him a sinker, belt high inside. Yeah, Aaron Judge is crushing that pitch every single day of the year. And, he just crushed out the left field to make it 2-0. But as you talked about, it's very nice to see the Mets respond right after. And I mean, we talk about Juan Soto, who, maybe we haven't exactly seen that big Juan Soto game. I feel like this was one of the, those big Juan Soto games, that we were waiting for, because he went 3-for-4. He went 3-4 in this game. He was a triple shy of the cycle. Had two big extra base hits in this game, and I mean the home run. And all year we've talked about it, and we've saw the numbers with him, how he struggled with runners in scoring position, but he comes through, and like I said, he hits the ball to the ball. He hits the ball to the part of the ballpark where once Soto's comfortable, that's where he looks to put that. That's where he looks to put that baseball. And again, left center field. That's his comfort spot. And the Mets answered back right there 2-2. And I mean, they get the big hit later on in the game from Pete Alonso, which drives in Soto to make it 3-2. Bellinger, answers back with a home run to make it 3-3. And then, Dominguez, hits a ball that barely gets out to put the Yankees up to 5-3. And then, but then, credit to Brett Beatty, who, has kind of tailed off a little bit since, getting on that hot streak a bit in early June, late May. And this was his first home run since the Tampa Bay Rays series in that second game. So, he's kind of been due for a home run, cuts the lead down to 5-4. And then look, Luke Weaver comes in, and, Jeff McNeil, who's been really good over these last couple weeks. Jefferson McNeil on the 4th of July to honor the second president of the United States, Thomas Jefferson, just crushes a ball into right field to put the Mets up 6-5. And I mean, Jeff McNeil, he got hype in that at bat, because once the ball came off the bat, he didn't even look at the ball. He knew right away that he got it. Puts the Mets up 6-5 in that situation. And then we talked about Reed Garrett, who came off a horrible appearance against the Brewers, where he gives up a grand slam, and the Mets ended up losing the first game of that series 6-2 or 7-2. But he ended up giving the grand slam. He comes in, pitches two very good innings, which was something that his Mets bullpen desperately needed. And I mean, again, credit to Jeff McNeil, who made a fantastic diving play on DJ LeMahieu to get the second out of that inning. And that was another big out as well, because if LeMahieu ends up squeaking that ball through the infield to get a single, and it's not a guarantee that Jason Dominguez gets a hit, or because he could have very well grounded into a game-ending double play. But if LeMahieu gets on base, there's a very good chance that Aaron Judge gets up in that last at bat. And even though we love Reed Garrett, Aaron Judge is a very dangerous hitter, to face against. So, you really didn't want to see that. But like I said, credit to McNeil on making that fantastic diving play to get LeMahieu out. And then, like I said, got to give major credit to Reed Garrett. Two very strong innings. This bullpen needed him to come up clutch, and he took care of business.
Yeah, I got to give credit to McNeil, considering how much we also slandered him on this podcast. I gotta say, I mean, he's playing good baseball, and am I ready to fill out the apology form to him and Marte? No, because I want to see it in the most important stretches of the season. But things are definitely trending in the direction to at least where I could maybe start to talk about apologizing for my slander behavior of those two individuals. But Either way, like we talked about before, reinforcements are on the way in terms of the pitching, in terms of the hitting. Jesse Winker is going to come back today, I'd imagine, which we're probably going to get the breaking news right as we end this episode because that's just how podcasting works. I'm assuming the corresponding move is going to be Travis Jankowski goes back to Syracuse or gets DFA'd, signs a deal with Syracuse. I don't know. Something along those lines. And then there is also help for the bullpen coming, as D commented, as he wanted us to discuss the flame throwing right handed reliever that they called up in Alex Carrillo, who played indie league ball actually last year, and the Mets signed him during the offseason. And someone actually liked my Stearns picture uh, to when they signed him back in November. So I guess I was excited for him then in terms of just looking at the velo and stuff. But this is what his advanced stats are looking like in terms of what you could look at as the positives with him. He is someone that does have high leverage upside, and he only pitched 5 2/3 of an inning in AAA, but he had a 0 WHIP, 0 ERA, 0.15 FIP across those 5 innings. So again, small sample size, but the guy just throws strikes and everything is graded out where you would want it to be. He could touch up to 100 with the four seam and the sinker. All of his stuff is positive stuff plus his sinker 102, stuff plus four seam 104, cutter 109, slider 104, and the changeup 107. The things that you definitely are concerned about with a guy like him is just the extension or lack of extension with Alex Carrillo could make it a little his velo seem a little less deceiving, gives hitters more time to catch up to, is what I'm getting at there. But I mean, he still throws the ball hard for the most part, and he has a very wide toolbox to where he's going to get outs. He has a lot of swing and miss stuff too, which is very encouraging. So I'm intrigued to see. I think this could be this year's version of Deadnell Nunez, except the guy has more tools in the toolbox. We'll see if he ends up being that, but I'm very excited to see, what you get from this guy, because someone that has, that much of an arsenal, all of his pitches graded out well, and then throws the ball as hard as he does. Pause. To me, that's all stuff that is intriguing out of a reliever option. And we talked about at nauseum how relievers are volatile. David Stern says that all the time. They're volatile. They're volatile. Let's see what you could get from a little bit of a project arm, which is something that, David Stearns excelled at last year, and getting those project arms to prevail this year really hasn't been as much. So maybe this is the guy. Maybe this is who ends up being that project arm, and you get big outs from him down the stretch here.
Yeah, Carrillo definitely does look like an interesting add to the bullpen. Just looking off, his, off the chart and stuff. I mean, all his pitch is great, and like you said, like what I really like is he has a very good pitch mix. I mean, sinker, four seamer, cutter, slider, changeup. So he definitely has a lot of weapons to work with. And I mean, all his pitches grade out well. I mean, they all grade out over 100 stuff plus. So that's something that you like to see. And like you said, it's a small sample size, only 5 2/3 innings of work. But the fact that he has a strikeout rate of 55.6, 0% walk rate, which is something I really like. And like you said, he throws strikes. He has a 69% strike rate. So that is something that you like to see out of a high leverage reliever, and like the swing and miss stuff is also there because I mean 57.1% whiff rate on the changeup. That's nice to see. 50% whiff rate on the cutter, 42.9 on the four seamer, 30 on the sinker, and then 100 on the slider. He definitely has an interesting arsenal, and yeah, like you said, he definitely has high leverage upside. So it's going to be interesting to see what we get. I mean, listen, it's not a guarantee that he's going to transition well into the major leagues because I mean, AAA in the majors, it is such a huge level in terms of talent jump. But even Isaac Groffman, who is a good follow on Twitter. So if you guys are interested, he does a very good job on pitching breakdowns. But he mentioned, he has a new changeup. Hits 90 miles an hour, very good movement. He mentioned that it could be a very legit weapon for him. And then he mentioned kind of refined the slider a little bit. It's kind of has more of a gyro shape. So, yeah, I mean, listen, let's see what he has. And like you mentioned, you know how Nunez came out of nowhere last year, and he was a very good weapon for the bullpen. Until he got injured later in the season. But listen, this bullpen needs help. So we saw Rico Garcia; he looked good. He's obviously gonna get another opportunity, like I said. But now if Carrillo could come in and establish himself as a really good option out of the bullpen, that's just another weapon to add. And until you start to get more guys healthy, like Brooks Raley, who's going to come back. Kranick is going to come back. Hopefully, he looks more of the guy that we saw earlier in the year, and the guy that we saw in spring training. And then hopefully, like the rumors that we saw last night. Andy Martino mentioned that it looks like pretty soon that the Mets could get some bullpen help in terms of the trade route. So we'll see. I mean, listen, like I said, for the Mets right now, it's all about just winning as many games as you possibly can, and then start to get reinforcements back, because the pitching side of this team needs reinforcements back, majorly. So if you could get back Mania back, Senga back, and then you could start to get a bunch of these bullpen arms back. And now, especially with getting Carrillo here in the bullpen, like I said, we'll see what he has. So it's good signs right now that this Mets team is looking like they're getting healthy, which finally, because these last few weeks with all the injuries happening, it's been a tough watch.
Yeah, and I'm glad that you brought up the report about the reliever thing, because another comment that I started here from Ray. I honestly have no faith in Stearns making a move for a quality player come the deadline. He will look for another makeover project. We'll see. If the rumor's true from what Martino said that they're looking in the market for a quality reliever, that intrigues me a lot more, because I think they need it. Because after losing AJ Minter, this bullpen has just not been the same. I mean, that just really changed the whole dynamic from what they had early on in the year, because you were able to space out Stanek a little bit more, and Reed Garrett, Diaz, all four of those guys were, some quality arms there that you were able to space out. So they're going to need to acquire quality either way. I'm not going to sit here and make a judgment if I trust him or not to do it until I see the deadline come and go, because I just don't think it's fair to make that assessment. But all I know is that I do think he does have to get quality baseball players, because this team desperately needs a quality bat. This team desperately needs a quality reliever. Starting pitching, I could live without a top end arm. I would prefer it. But to me, I would really like it, because there was the Mitch Keller rumors. I'd be very happy about that. The guy goes out there and consistently gives 6 innings and consistently gives quality starts for the most part. There will be times he gets touched up just because he's such a, master of the strike zone, and sometimes he'll lose the zone a little bit and leave too much over the plate to where he'll get touched up a little bit. But, for the most part, he would be, something this team has lacked all season long, which is just a pure innings eater. And if you could walk away from the deadline with, a quality bat, a quality reliever, and a Mitch Keller, and maybe you get one other reliever and one or two other smaller pieces for the lineup, just to either be bench players, platoon players, whatever. I think that would be the ideal world for this team come the trade deadline, because to me, Mark Vientos, I think, is a guy that has to get moved at the deadline. Like, I'm sorry, and he might bounce back and thrive somewhere else. I can't count on that here when this team's trying to win a World Series this year. I just can't, unless he shows something within the next 3 weeks to prove that the 2024 Mark Vientos is there. With the rotation, if it's not Mitch Keller, another name I would really like is, I mean, obviously I'd like Sandy, but I don't know the asking price there. If Nathan Eovaldi's available, I think that would be a really, really good acquisition. I mean, if there was a world that could acquire both Eovaldi and um, Mitch Keller, and then all of a sudden this rotation's really deep, that would be nice. But right now, I just think they need to find inning eaters more than anything else.
No, 100%. I mean, it's going to be interesting to see who the guys that they're going to add at the deadline. Because I mean, on the pitching side, and I know like we talked about the Martino report yesterday. I mean, in terms of a high leverage guy out of the bullpen, it's going to be interesting to see who they target and what the price is. Because if you guys recall to last year at the trade deadline, the prices on relief, especially high quality relievers, was high. I mean, the Padres last year acquired both Tanner Scott and Jason Adam at the trade deadline last year, and they gave up a lot of prospects to get those two guys. So I'm interested to see what exactly the price point is going to be for for exactly top relievers. And I mean, if the Mets are going to add a high quality reliever, I would more like it to be a lefty because I think they need more of a lefty high quality guy because I mean they lost Minter. Obviously, Rayleigh has looked good in his rehab start so far, but that's not necessarily a guarantee that's going to translate well into the major leagues. Like I said before, so like I said, I would like it to be a lefty, but obviously, we have to see, who's exactly out there right now, and I mean that's something that we're going to look at because as we get closer to the deadline, we'll probably have like a stream or two, where we're looking and breaking down at trade deadline targets. So
Probably during the All-Star break, we'll do some
yeah,
trade deadline stuff.
so yeah, we'll see what happens there. And I mean, from the starting pitching side, I mean, Mitch Keller, in my opinion, he would be a very good act because, like you said, he goes out there, he gives you innings, he throws strikes. Nathan Eovaldi, that's also a guy who I would really like. I mean, that was a guy that we were talking about, in the offseason that could be a potential ad. There were the rumors, of course, that Sandy could be a potential target, but again, what's the asking price for the Marlins from him on there? I mean, there's also two other guys that are out there, both former Mets as well,
Are these
because
them?
the Royals are struggling. Yeah, I mean these two. Yeah, Seth Lugo. Who the Mets are going to face the Royals in the next upcoming or the series after Baltimore. So we'll see if the Mets end up facing him. He could be a very interesting ad as well. And then Sevy could be a very interesting target because I don't think the asking price is going to be very high on him, high on him also, just because we've heard the rumors that him and the A's that relationship is basically broken down to just a flaming pile of garbage because he hates pitching. He hates pitching in that minor league ballpark over there in Sacramento. I mean, even when you look at the splits, I mean the splits are just night and day. Sevy's ERA is just a complete mess over there in Sacramento, and then when he pitches on the road, he actually looks like a solid pitcher, and the guy that we saw last year. So. Listen, I'm not saying that Sevy's my favorite pitcher to go at this trade deadline, but he could be a very intriguing piece to go get. So, I mean, listen, we'll see what happens.
The thing I don't know what Severino. Like the thing is, you're gonna have to have them eat money
Yeah,
on that one. Unless the only way that I would really be interested in Severino, to be honest with you, is if you taking on all of Severino's contract would be able to get them Mason Miller in the deal too. You know, obviously have to give up a lot still to get Mason Miller, but if you're talking about them paying Severino's contract entirely, getting Mason Miller for the back end of the bullpen, and this team showed that they could probably fix Severino into being a serviceable arm despite having not a great year at all right now. A lot of that is because of where he's pitching, but also on the road he's been struggling lately too. But to me, the only way I'm interested in the Severino thing again is if you're getting Mason Miller in that deal too, or I don't know Brent Rooker's availability. I doubt he's available because they just extended him.
yeah, I don't think they're
But
trading him.
yeah, but like if you're getting a good bat in the deal, like even if it's not him, if you're getting a good bat and Severino to take on that contract, then you can intrigue me. But I'm not that interested in Severino straight up by himself because to me, I would rather get. I think Keller's a better arm. I really think Keller's better. I think there's less risk with him as well because he goes out there and pitches 6 innings every single time he's out there, pretty much. I think it was Carson was talking about on his show for Mets Weekly, which go check them out. He was saying, I think 12 of his 15 starts, if that number's correct, something like that. He's thrown 6 innings. So to me, or at least touch the 6th inning, touch the mound in the 6th inning. So to me, that would be more intriguing with what this team needs compared to, kind of the project thing with Luis Severino. Sure, if Shea Langoliers is available, who is named after Shea Stadium as well, um, maybe that's more intriguing because this team desperately needs a catcher that could actually hit the ball. Um, that's something that you could maybe sell me on if they're getting Langoliers in the deal, but I'm not sure if that's an option either. But to me, it's like you got to be getting something else outside of just
Yeah.
Severino Seth Lugo, though, I'm definitely interested in. I think Lugo would be a perfect fit for this team as well. Just eats innings, and he would be a prototypical David Stearns type acquisition too, where the guy throws the kitchen sink. He's a better version of Paul Blackburn, but obviously by a long shot, he's better than Blackburn. But just in terms of the regard of throwing the kitchen sink and just giving quality innings most of the time, unlike Blackburn, where he throws the kitchen sink but doesn't give quality.
Yeah, no, no. Listen, I agree. I think Sevy would be an intriguing piece, but just him alone, I probably wouldn't pull off that trade. But if the A's would be throwing in a guy like Mason Miller or a guy like Brent Rooker, which, like I said, I don't think they're going to trade Brent Rooker just because they extended him and he's a very big part of that lineup. But at that point, I would be intrigued. But if it's just Sevy, I probably wouldn't be so much intrigued. I think there are better options in terms of guys like Keller, Evaldi, Seth Lugo. Obviously, he's an option which I definitely would like to see. I definitely would like to see a Seth Lugo return because it sucked. It sucked when he initially first left because he probably wasn't going to get the opportunity here, to be a full time starting pitcher. He was a very good reliever for this team, especially 2019. We'll never forget about 2019. Seth Lugo, he was very dominant. He was very dominant at that Mets bullpen, but you know, I mean, like you said, with the comparable to Paul Blackburn, because that's one thing about Blackburn that I do like. He throws a lot of pitches. It's just doesn't pitch. He doesn't throw his pitches well. But that's the upside with Seth Lugo, where throws a lot of pitches. I think he throws like 9, 8 different pitches, but he actually throws them well. Throws for strikes, gets swings and misses, can get light contact on the ground or in the air. Seth Lugo would be a very good option if they were to trade for him. But we'll see. Listen, there's a couple. I think 3.5 more weeks to the trade deadline. So clock's ticking, time's ticking. So we'll see what happens.
By the way, we did have news about um the roster moves just now. So Jesse Winker's back. Starling Marte is going on the IL, the 10-day injured list, because naturally he would. Tyler McGill got transferred to the 60-day, which makes sense. That injury seems like it's more than just a 15-day IL stint. Carrillo's got called up. Zach Pop, smell you later. He gets DFA'd. And then Sean Manaea is continuing his rehab assignment with AAA tonight. So that probably lines him up to start the last game in Kansas City, if I'm not mistaken there. And then I don't know who Junior Fernandez is, but he's been signed to a minor league contract and will report to Syracuse. So more depth there. But yes, the Zach Pop era the Pops era has come to an end in Queens. But yeah, happy to see Winker back. It sucks that Marte starts playing some good hoops and he ends up getting injured. But we'll see how much Winker could hold down the fort now. And I guess Vientos is the right-handed DH for the time being. I'm sure that excites everyone. But I mean, you might as well see what you could get from him from the DH spot at this point, because he can't play the field. And these last 3 weeks, it kind of feels like this is where his Mets tenure is in jeopardy. I think these last 3 weeks are really going to tell if he stays or not, because he's the guy I would want to move the most out of Beatty and Mauricio, and then of course himself.
Yeah. I think the only thing I'll add here with the fact that that Marte is going on the IL, it sucks because, like you said, he's actually playing very good baseball right now. So to lose him now, it does suck. But since he is going on the IL, can we please keep Brandon Nimmo in the leadoff position full time now? Can we not do this thing where we're
Yes.
taking him out where if a lefty's on the mound, especially a starter, keep Brandon Nimmo full time in the
Mark
leadoff spot
Vientos leads
because
off.
I don't want to see Mark Vientos lead off. Okay, if that happens, throw myself out the window. No, keep Nimmo full time in the leadoff spot. It's working right now. Both him and Lindor have looked a lot better ever since they switched spots. With the leadoff spot in the 2 hole. So if it's working right now, just keep it that way.
Yeah, if Mark Vientos is leading off games, we're gonna have some serious problems here.
Vientos is going to lead off the game with a bunt, and he's going to get thrown out by 50 feet.
Oh, let's not talk about bunts. I'm still very annoyed with the Soto one, even though they won that game. But let's preview what's coming up and then end the episode, because we are already over an hour, and usually we keep these under an hour. But in terms of the pitching matchups versus the Orioles, Brandon Young versus Clay Holmes. Brandon Young is 0-3 on the year with a 7.02 ERA and a 1.98 WHIP. So he hasn't been great this year. Clay Holmes, 8-4 on the year, 2.99 ERA and a 1.24 whip. Game number two, Tomoyuki Sugano, who is 6-5 on the year with a 4.44 ERA. I'm sorry if I said his name wrong, by the way. A 1.31 whip. He did start off relatively hot, kind of cooled off. Versus David Peterson, who is coming off some better starts as of lately, 6-4 on the year, a 3.18 ERA and a 1.27 whip. And then in game number three, it is Charlie Morton. Do not let these numbers fool you. He's 5-7 with a 5.47 ERA and a 1.55 whip. He has been very good though over the past 3 to 4 weeks. So don't let the full season fool you about how Charlie Morton has been. Plus against the Mets, I mean that's his World Series right there. So Charlie Morton, I'm sure will Unk will find his prime form against the Mets, I'm sure, because that's just the way it goes. We don't know who's pitching game number three as of this juncture right now for the New York Mets. I'd imagine that's going to be one of those spot starts yet again, unless maybe they move Montas up a day, because I believe he would be the guy that lines up, and then that opens the flexibility to maybe put Senga in for that first game of the Royal Series, or you move up, or maybe do a spot start the next day. Then uh you go with Senga and then Manaya. I don't know how that's going to line up. All I know is that this is a team that you should be beating up on. They are playing garbage baseball. I'll be on the optimistic side like I was this past series, and I will say they're going to sweep the series because you got to beat up on this team. I mean, they're not playing good ball. I know they just swept the Braves, but you know, outside of them overcoming the propaganda, you should be annihilating them.
Yeah, I mean, listen, if they could find a way to sweep the Orioles, we would all take that, and I would love that. I'll be a little bit conservative though. I'll say they'll take 2 out of 3. I'd be fine with 2 out of 3. I think the key is make sure you would just win those first 2 games. Make sure you win those first 2 games because I mean Brandon Young. I mean you look at the numbers. He has had a terrible year so far, and I mean even Doug has just mentioned in the chat that he hasn't gone past the fifth inning. So beat up on him, get him out of the game as early as possible, and get that Orioles bullpen. And obviously, we'll see with Clay Holmes. He's been decent his last couple starts. Hasn't exactly been the sharpest Clay Holmes that we saw at the beginning of the year, but he's still been solid. So, the Mets should be winning this first game tonight. I mean, the second game, Peterson, who, he had those rough 2 starts both in Philly and in Pittsburgh. He bounced back, though, with a very good quality start against the Brewers, so hopefully he continues his good form. And, I mean, Sagano, he's a decent pitcher, but I think the Mets should be able, to beat up on him as well. And then, I mean, listen, Charlie Morton, we'll see what happens. Had a terrible start to the year, has been a bit better, like you saw over these past 3 to 4 weeks. So, and he always likes to play up the competition, especially when he's playing the Mets. So, we'll see what happens. Just hopefully he doesn't throw up Pete Alonso's hands because I don't need Pete having a broken finger. Knock on wood. I mean, listen, the third game, we'll see what happens in terms of the pitching side. I think right now the rumor is that probably Hageman is going to start that game, or at least he'll pitch the majority of the games as a bulk reliever out of the bullpen. Obviously, maybe Brosman starts the game, maybe Davinsky starts the game. So we'll see what happens. But I mean, they should take 2 out of 3 in the series. I mean, look, the Orioles still have a dangerous lineup. They do, even though pitching side they haven't been great. I mean, O'Hearn's had a pretty good year. Gunnar Henderson is still an elite talent. Jackson Holiday has had a decent year. I mean, Adley Rutschman has had a good year at all, 691 OPS, but still is a very good bat. And I mean, the Mets are also going to be facing Cedric Mullins, who is potentially a center field option in terms of a trade candidate. So we'll see. Maybe at the end of the month, we'll see Cedric Mullins in a center fielder spot for the Mets. So, but we'll see what happens. Listen, if you take 2 out of 3, I will take that. But if, like what Evan mentioned, if they sweep, I will gladly take that as well. But just keep on winning series. That's the main goal right now.
Yeah, get some scouting work on Mullins. Maybe he'll do the winker, have a big game with the Orioles here, beat them, and then down the stretch he'll have to make up for it. Being on the Mets. So we'll see. Also, last thing I want to quickly bring up. Shout out to Lindor, Alonso, and Diaz on their All-Star appearances. Fuck the MLB for not including Juan Soto, which I understand it with the voting, and I understand why he's not starting, but he should be a reserve at the very least over Fernando Tatis. It's a joke, but
Yeah.
I've already ranted about that. I'm not going to go on about the All Star game more.
Yeah, no, congratulations to both, or all three of them, Diaz, Lindor, and Pete. All three of them are very deserving of all-star spots. And listen, Juan Soto should be an all-star. Like that's not even I get it. He got off to a very slow start this year, but you look at his numbers in June specifically. I mean, he had an all-time June. I think he had the second highest OPS ever as a Met, in one particular month. So the fact he didn't make the All-Star game, that's a joke and that sucks. I think he might end up though going to the All-Star game just because Corbin Carroll. I know he came back from his recent injury, but I think he said he probably won't be participating in the All-Star game. So maybe Juan Soto does get added to the All-Star game, but regardless, he should have been in there in the first place. So, but it is what it is. Hopefully, he just uses that as motivation to go out there and just kick some ass in the second half. Going into the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, top 10 in home runs, top 10 OPS in the league, but not an all star. Just great league. Great league. We're going to wrap things up here, though. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in and watching. Remember, it is a 6:30 start time tonight, so don't be fooled like I probably will. Even though I'm saying this now, I'll probably tune in at 7 and see it's the second inning and be confused. But thank you, everyone, for watching. Leave a like if you enjoyed. Subscribe. Turn on your notifications so you know when we upload or go live. And we'll see you guys in the next one.